Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. Today's episode is Real Estate Fair to Foreclosure.
Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast with Scott Whitwam, your blueprint to financial abundance. Settle in as we explore the mindset and methods for wealth building through real estate.
Welcome back. I'm Scott Whitwam, and today we're going to be talking about real estate investing from a fair market to a pre-foreclosure one. My first point is, let's just take a look back at where we were at the end of 2021. Now, I know that's like 4 years ago, but I think it's really important that we realize where we are in our marketplace and where we may be for a very short season here. When we look back to 2021, we were in one of the hottest real estate markets of my lifetime. Our real estate investing business was off the charts. Most of my friends who were investing in real estate had, the deals were everywhere. They were making profit on almost everything. Money was easy to find. There were investors everywhere financing and funding our deals. So by the time we got to the end of 2021, expectations of people had changed. Sellers just assumed their houses would sell in 1, 2, 3 days. They expected to get a very good price for their home. They didn't expect to make repairs. Contingencies were waived. Things were really moving in 2021. So that kind of brings me to the second point, which is after a very strong market, we kind of hit a wall in quarter 2 of 2022. So what was the thing that changed? Well, we had a political change in the election in 2020. President Donald Trump then ran for re-election, and he lost to now former President Joe Biden. This was all during, COVID had started. There were lockdowns, and things were crazy. And by the time we hit the second quarter of 2022, so Joe Biden got inaugurated and appointed as the president in January of 2021. And so the rest of 2021 was a super strong market, but the political winds had started to change. The implementation of economic policies were changing. Basically, the things that were moving forward under Donald Trump, there was such an opposition to him and his policies and his way of doing things that basically everything that had been put in place under the Trump administration was now being changed. Oil policy, green energy policy, economic policy. So by the time we hit the end of 2021, there had been so much money dumped into our economy and under the Trump administration with COVID, and not stopped, but doubled down on by the Biden administration. By the time we got to the first part of 2022, some things had started to change. We started to see inflation in our marketplace. We started to see a pullback in the real estate market because interest rates started to escalate. And by the time we got to quarter 2 of 2022, things were all of a sudden starting to slow down dramatically. So it really started to change, at least people in the industry, their look on things. Certainly in the real estate retail market, our brokerage side of things, we could see a real change. On our investing, our fix and flip side of things, we could see a tremendous change. And almost overnight, money started to get a little bit tighter. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, which at the time of this podcast, he is still the chairman of the Fed, and I don't know why. And Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, fortunately, she's gone. Their monetary policy was horrible. Their insight into where the markets were going was absolutely wrong. They kept talking about transitory inflation. However, there wasn't any transitory economic policies being put into place. Spending was out of control on the federal level. They were pumping way too many dollars into the economy. But they kept looking at this as transitory. And by the time that they realized that it wasn't just transitory inflation, that there was real inflation, The only thing Chairman Powell knew to do was raise interest rates, and at about a 2,000% clip by the time he was done. And now we come out of this hot market, we go into the slow market. Interest rates are extremely high, and so what it looked like now is hard money became hard to get at good rates. Selling was becoming tough. Days on market were escalating. Demand for housing was waning because interest rates were higher. People who had low interest rate mortgages didn't want to sell and repurchase at these higher mortgage rates. And renting, though people were still occupying properties, renting had changed, and we went into a time where we started to hit a huge number of evictions on the rental side of things. So not only did the sales side of things, so the fix and flip, which meant it affected wholesale, and also on the buy and hold side of things had started to change. So that brings us kind of to my third point, which is where we were going the first part of this year. So obviously in 2024, we had another election. Former President Donald Trump against then President Joe Biden, and then Vice President Kamala Harris. And President Donald Trump won a second term, and the anticipation was that policy would change very similarly to what it was in Trump's first term. And based upon that, we started to see consumer confidence rise. So prior to this, we were seeing investors who were facing foreclosures in huge numbers. Hard money guys were having to take properties back. Many of my friends who were long on flipping properties were losing millions of dollars in that market. But here comes a change. President Donald Trump gets reelected. Consumer confidence starts to change. And, right before the election, it looked like the Fed was going to get a little bit more serious about economic policy. But again, they overdid it, dropping, the base rate by a whole point right before an election. And I'm not saying that it was done in order to try to change what was going on in the election cycle, but it looked pretty much like that's what the reason is, especially when we look back now since that decision was made and after the election, the position that the Fed has taken that have all been contrary to the economic plan of the current administration. So we come to the first part of this year, and we start to see consumer confidence come up. Interest rates haven't gone down. Interest rates were still, we're still hovering. But what we're starting to see is a little bit of a change now in where we're going in the first part of the year. And I know it's never good to dip off camera, but what happened is we saw in the first quarter where people started to say, okay, well, interest rates are a little bit higher, but based on these economic policies, we think the future bodes for lower interest rates. And so we actually started to see a little bit of an economic turn up in the first quarter, probably right till about the first part of April. Well, what happened around the first part of April? President Donald Trump started talking about tariffs. And as soon as he started talking about tariffs, the news cycle changed and started saying this is the worst idea ever. This is going to create incredible inflation. It's going to stymie the economy. It's going to cause interest rates to go up. And this was their hypothesis. This is what they thought would happen based upon this decision to implement a new tariff system amongst not only China, but also all of the developing nations in the world, and actually all of the nations that trade with the U.S. When something's not working and you've been doing it that same way for a long time, sometimes it's the new idea that runs contrary to the common way of thinking that hasn't produced anything that will create a different result. The question is, what kind of result? But based upon President Trump's first term, I think that we could have probably been a little bit more tempered in the news cycles to say, hey, wait, let's give this a chance to play out and see where it goes. Well, what happened is the news cycle started talking about how horrible the economy was going to be, how bad it was going to be, and then we started to see consumer confidence drop off again. By the time we got to the middle of May, though, what we saw is that inflation went down, Employment numbers got a whole lot better. Government employment shrunk. Private sector employment increased. Money being pumped into the economy was decreasing as DOGE was putting forth opportunities for the government to rescind money that they had allocated, which would bring billions of dollars back into the Treasury and get it out of the economy, shrink the money pool, which will strengthen the economy. Consumer price index has all turned positive. And now consumer confidence has hit a 40-year high. According to the news cycle, it was running about 98%. And people are getting very confident with where we're going because everything that the news cycle said, the CNNs, the MSNBCs said was going to happen, how we're going to crash the economy, all those things, none of it happened. Absolutely the opposite have happened. And we've seen other countries come to the negotiating table to bring better tariff agreements with the United States, kind of balancing out the field of play, bringing more money into the U.S. Treasury and creating a more balanced environment for the economy for fair trade. All things that are really good. The only problem is anytime the news cycles start to talk about how bad things are going to get, it puts pressure on our real estate economy. So my fourth point is where we are now. Right now, we see that our inventories are up. Fact is, according to this report that I've got, I think this one was from Fox Business. It says home sellers face harsh new reality as listings hit $6.98 billion value. So more and more properties are on the market, which is really good for buyers because now they get more choices, more options. The only problem is the bond market has followed the news cycle and the bonds market has gotten worse, which the bond market drives our retail interest rates, which really drive the amount of sales that we see in the marketplace, whether people think or feel that they can afford to purchase at a certain interest rate or price point. So inventory is coming up. The only problem is buyers are pulling back out of the marketplace again. So what the conclusions are in this article, and I agree with them, is that it's going to create a tighter market and economy for sellers, people who want to sell. With inventories up, now sellers are going to have to be more negotiable, and we're seeing that on the retail side, inside the retail brokerage side of things, that offers from buyers are not at asking price. Even though listing prices are up, sale prices are down. The market's becoming more, I would say, a little bit more tight with regards to sellers being able to get and take advantage of these new price points that they're expecting. They're expecting the higher prices, but now properties are sitting on the market. Days on market nationwide are way up. In the area where I'm at here in the Phoenix area, days on market have been bumping anywhere between the high 70s, 78, 79 days on the market, into the mid 80s. And that means properties are sitting on the market a lot longer. Higher priced homes are sitting even longer. Homes that are priced at the top of the market that are in average condition are sitting on the market way longer than houses that are competitively priced. And statistics are showing. I've got some statistics on our local area, and Phoenix is a pretty good indicator. It's one of the, I would say, 5 real estate markets that run pretty true. There's the Miami, the Atlanta, the Las Vegas, maybe Houston, some of these areas that are pretty strong real estate markets, a lot of activity. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing listing counts up, and we're seeing the average price per square foot come down as sellers are now needing to negotiate out of their listings in order to sell it, or they're pulling their properties off the market. We're still in one of these situations where there's a lot of pent-up buyer demand. The only problem is there's not near the demand for people to be negotiable on the seller side, because a lot of these people, even though they're listing their homes, they're sitting on 3% mortgages. And they're not looking forward to exchanging that 3% mortgage for a 7% mortgage. So it's creating some competitiveness, I would say, in the marketplace. For buyers, it's really good. If you're in the position to purchase and can afford the payments with the interest rates that are out there, or you're buying cash, there's a lot more negotiating options. We're still getting sellers to pay larger concessions. But what does this mean for you as an investor? This means that your property that you're remodeling right now may be sitting on the market longer, and you're going to have higher overhead on the project. If you're using hard money or even traditional consumer investment funds, you're going to be paying more in interest to carry that home for a longer period of time. It also means that if you're looking at getting into acquiring a property using hard money or conventional funds, that your interest rate is going to be much higher. A lot of these hard money guys, they took back a lot of properties in 2020 into 2022, 2023, and 2024, and they've still got inventory that they're carrying, and they're still suffering from the foreclosures that they had on the investor side or the wholesale side of things. So things are a little bit tighter. We're seeing just in the Phoenix marketplace that we almost have a 4-month supply of inventory, and that is very, very high for our marketplace. But we're not the only place. Like I said, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Miami, Houston, Austin, Dallas, a lot of these places that are strong markets and typically perform a little better than other places in the U.S. are suffering a little bit because of where we're at. What does that mean? That means that we're going to start seeing some more foreclosures hit our marketplace. And that hints to the title of this episode, From Fair. We went from a fair market to now where I believe if the Fed won't act, even though the economy is starting to show great signs, but if the Fed won't act and start to pull back commercial investing rate for manufacturing and some of these things, it's going to slow down the private sector job growth, which is going to keep money out of the marketplace that could come into the real estate investing market. So the future right now, and I think it's a short-term lag, it may take us deep into Q4 of this year, is that you're going to start seeing short sales and foreclosures pop up in the marketplace again, which can be good for us as investors if we're in a position to acquire. It's just we have to be ready to purchase those. I mean, foreclosure and short sale properties typically require a different type of investor. If you're an investor that's out trying to buy everything you can on owner financing, you can't do that with a short sale or foreclosure. You have to have cash, which means you either need hard money guys or you need to be able to purchase with cash. They can't be assigned, so you can't do it as a wholesaler because they won't take assignment clauses in short sale properties, and generally or foreclosure properties, the banks want to see an end buyer on the product. So here's my final thoughts. The market has gotten a little bit tougher. It's gone from fair to where we're facing a foreclosure market. I think it's going to be short-lived. I think that once Chairman Powell either decides to resign or finally gives way to the economic policies of the current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and Donald Trump, I think it's going to open things up. I think the bond market will come back in line, and we'll start to see lower interest rates, but it may take a few months. But in the meantime, if you can position yourself to start to acquire some of these assets that are becoming troubled and going into short sale and foreclosure status, again, I don't think it's going to be long-lived, but you may have some great opportunities to pick up some things. When this all turns around, I think we're going to see more like 2019, 2020, 2021 real estate market again. It's going to ramp up pretty quick, and we're going to see it. So we're going to go from this fair market, I think, into this foreclosure market, and my estimation is by the time we get to the end of the year, we're going to start to go back to a good market. At least one can hope so. I think the economic signs and indications are there to get us there. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. Be sure to check out our growing list of previous episodes on other real estate investing topics. I invite you to subscribe today and be part of our growing community. You can always find the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts. This is Scott Whitwam. Be sure to join me on our next episode of the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast, where we're wealth building through real estate.